David Stephan here. This is being streamed out to a few different locations, so this isn't just explicit to or specifically to my Facebook page. This was going to be a part of the Truehope podcast that can be found on truehopecanada.com. Now, people have been following me or been following what's been going on with Truehope as well as the whole natural health industry. You've likely seen some of my interviews in the near past with Shawn Buckley, who's a constitutional lawyer. He's been involved for a significant amount of time in relation to helping to protect the natural health industry here in Canada. And because of that, he has a long-standing history with myself, with my father, with our company as a whole. But also he's played some other roles in our lives as well. And we're going to touch on that in a brief moment here. And so tonight, what we were going to be talking about was the fact that Health Canada has now stooped to a new low. That in an effort or an attempt to justify their draconian proposed regulations on the natural health industry that will literally weed out a lot of products available to you currently within Canada on the store shelves, but also the products that survive will substantially increase the cost of those products, making them unaffordable to the common man, especially during an economic downturn. And so we're going to be talking about how Health Canada has now stooped to a new low, where now they're actually using the death of my son, Ezekiel, to justify why they're saying that they need these regulations. And so we're going to be talking about that. But here's the issue, is that Shawn is a very busy man. He is presenting on all sorts of stuff. He's on podcasts all the time. And tonight, something came up and he was not available. And so we are booking it now for December 1st, 2 p.m. Mountain Time. So we hope that you can catch us at that point in time. He's going to be going over some of the files so that he can make sure that he is well versed on this particular topic. And here's why. Because the death of my son, Shawn Buckley, is really familiar with. And the reason being is that he began representing my wife and I in 2013, a number of months after we were charged. He was there for the preliminary hearing in 2014 when we got the evidence that my son ended up in an ambulance that was being run by Alberta Health Services that was not properly equipped. Should have had his standard equipment, standard intubation equipment, and they didn't have it. And so it was only a matter of time before a toddler ended up in that ambulance and died. And so he was familiar with that because he cross-examined the two paramedics that were in that ambulance that night that my son needed an airway, and that they weren't able to get him an airway for over 8.5 minutes. And so he's familiar with that. He represented us in the 2016 trial when the Crown attempted to turn this into an attack on natural health, as well as an attack on parental rights and medical choice here in Canada, where they actually tried to attach to the death of my son a precedent that would hold parents criminally liable if they chose not to get their children injected with poison, right? That poison is being, touted as life-saving, that it eradicates diseases, whatever. Doesn't. Well, they had to drop that portion of the trial in 2016 when we came forward with two expert witnesses, Dr. Tony Bark and Dr. Tatiana Obekamich, that were bringing forward reports that not only were these injections not safe, that people could die from them, but also that they were not effective, that people were still dying from, children were dying from these infections that they were supposedly inoculated for. And so he is extremely well versed in that, but he's also well versed in the causation of death and what rolled out. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but how we discovered that the initial autopsy report, or the autopsy report, was completely falsified, and that the two listed causes of death were completely debunked, and that they had to withhold medical evidence in the first trial to even try to generate that narrative. But that medical evidence was found by the time that 2019 rolled around, where now Shawn Buckley, during the second trial, represented my wife, and I was self-represented at this point in time, which was extremely liberating and vindicating in the sense that I got to face my accusers of all the doctors in AHS, as well as the medical examiner who put myself and my wife in the situation where, we ultimately ended up in jail over the matter. And I ended up in solitary confinement for 3 weeks before I got out on appeal. So Shawn Buckley is going to be reviewing the materials so that he can speak very effectively to this. Because I'm going to give a teaser here as to where Health Canada is going with this. So just stay tuned for just a brief moment. I'm going to show just a short clip here and then end it off not far thereafter.
Present these products. They are generally low risk, but we had a tragic 19-month-old in Alberta that died because of using natural health products instead of treatment for meningitis. Dr. Steve Findle, his emergency physician in Toronto, had a patient that was stable on medications for seizures, was taken off those medications, was put on zinc, went into status epilepticus, which is constant seizures, and died. So it does happen. And so it's really the principle is Canadians should be able to, they're self-selecting. So they're self-selecting these products. They should have the assurance that they're going into a safe marketplace when they're picking up a product. What's on the label is what's in the bottle. What the advertising claims that are made are accurate, and that the quality of that product that's in that bottle is high quality, and it's not going to be contaminated with bacteria or other things as well. That's the principle.
Dr. Sharma, I want to go back to one of your comments that you made earlier on, and you referenced some deaths from attributed to natural health products. One was the 18-month-old toddler in Alberta. I believe it's Ezekiel Stephan that you're referring to. Isn't it true that the situation is different than what you're stating? The baby didn't pass away from using or taking natural health products.
All right. So that's just a little teaser. The video does go on for about another 5 minutes. But it's interesting because this began to emerge we're sitting now about a month out since Health Canada is now resurrecting the false narrative surrounding the death of my son, now to try to justify these regulations. Now, they've had a lot of dealings with us now, going back to October of 2000, when they first introduced themselves to my father and tried to shut down our products, cut them off at the border, eventually came in at gunpoint and raided our head office. We're talking, they know our family well. And they also know the situation well, because we've got evidence that came to us during the whole court proceedings that Health Canada actually had their dirty fingers on the investigation. And so we have that evidence that shows that they were scoping around. And of course they would be. They hate our family. We spent over 10 years in the courts with them. We beat them in the courts. We end up suing them as well. We strewed their name through the mud for many years. And we exposed them for who they are, a bunch of corrupt murderers. Actually, if you go to healthcanadaexposed.com, you'll actually see portions of the transcript of the 2005 trial that highlights that these investigators knew that they were causing major issues, including death, and that they were just taking their marching orders and they're continuing on. They were literally killing Canadians due to their actions against us at Truehope, and they knew it. They knew that they were causing deaths, and yet they had no desire at all to change what their mode of action was, until it became so bad in the media for them. It was such a black eye, and especially with the thousands of Canadians that were rising up and saying, you give us our natural health products. And they finally caved under the pressure, and they allowed the thousands of Canadians that were taking the Empower Plus at that time to continue to get it, whereas they had shut it off for quite some time before that. So Health Canada has been involved in some really egregious criminal acts where they've literally killed Canadians, and they know our family well. And now they've gone personal on this, where they're now exploiting the death of my son to try to justify removing your rights to having natural health products. So we're going to be talking about that when Shawn's able to make it on December 1st, 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Like I said, he had something pop up tonight that prevented him from being able to be on here. And we look forward to having him on here so that he can articulate from his lawyer perspective in representing Truehope through all those years, representing other natural health companies in helping to overcome these hurdles that Health Canada loves to throw in our way to try to prevent therapeutic products from being available to you as Canadians. And then furthermore, representing myself and my wife throughout our own criminal proceedings after we were charged in the death of our son after they falsified the autopsy report and created quite a fantastic narrative based off of really mainly the PCR test. They had to use a PCR test to get a false positive so that they could say that my son had bacterial meningitis, which we are going to be covering because he never had bacterial meningitis. He didn't die from meningitis. And there's something else that took place behind the scenes that was far more nefarious that is going to be uncovered in all of this. And we're going to discuss that in more detail. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. Health Canada begins to resurrect this narrative to try to remove your rights through an emotional appeal saying children are dying, right? Here's Ezekiel Stephan. They're saying 19-month-old. He was actually 18 months old. You can see the contrast there with Dr. Sharma, Health Canada doctor, saying 19-month-old died in Alberta. And then you see the politician respond back in saying that, that's basically a false narrative. That's not how it went. But he says 18-month-old Ezekiel Stephan. He has his facts closer. He was 18 months. She's misquoting some media reports on it, which were saying 19 months for many years, but he was 18 months old when he passed. And so what's interesting about this is they bring forth this narrative at the same time that this 6-part docu-series comes out that actually showcases our story, showcases the truth of what led to the passing of my son, that actually gives you the truth. There has been a docu-series, a 5-part docu-series in the past that was done back in 2018. And it was well done, but it included some real garbage. So it never really got out there broadly because they went and interviewed the doctors and stuff like that. And they never allowed us to rebut and expose those doctors for the lies. So unfortunately, they were trying to take a real balanced approach without allowing a jousting to go back and forth. They just went to the doctor and said, this is what the Stephans are saying, and allowed the doctors to try to rebut what we were saying, but never allowed us to rebut the lies that these doctors were spewing. And so we never really felt inclined to share that docu-series because of the approach that they took. It just left it wasn't even close to the truth in that sense. It was truthful in what we said, but what the doctors were saying to cover up the system, to cover up the fact that Alberta Health Services involved themselves in some criminal behaviors in relation to criminal negligence resulting in the death of my son. Unfortunately, it just wasn't shareable. So this is the second docu-series that has come out, and this does a fantastic job of telling our story, as well as covering the big picture of what's going on in relation to what we're facing today and over the past 3 years. But obviously, anybody who's had their eyes open for longer than the last 3 years realizes that, they saw the signs, they saw the writing on the wall, that this has been, emerging for a very, very long time. I mean, we take a look at 9/11 and really you see the writing on the wall before, where they're showing it in Hollywood movies. They're giving you the signs. They're telling you what's about to happen. And so we know that this has been in play for quite some time. And so the big picture, living within the control grid, really covers that off. It incorporates mine and my wife's story, as well as it interviews a lot of doctors and scientists and just really smart people that are able to articulate what is going on within our lives today. And so it's rightfully entitled The Big Picture. And so I'm actually going to show you a teaser here, and then I'm going to close off, and I will see everybody hopefully December 1st at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time with Shawn Buckley, armed with a bunch of information. He needs to review some of the court files so that he understands what actually took place with my son. Obviously, he's a busy man and he covers a lot of stuff, so he doesn't have all the details quite as sharp as maybe somebody like myself, who has more of an emotional investment into it, being that that's really been our lives for quite some time. So he needs to go and review some documents so that he can make sure that he presents some very quality, truthful information. So here's the teaser in relation to the Big Picture docuseries. I'm going to also share here, if we take a look here. So bigpicture.com. No, that's wrong. I think it's bigpicturemovie.com, not big. Okay, so don't ignore that. That was input wrong. Bigpicturemovie.com. Bigpicturemovie.com. So here's the teaser here. In 2016, I found myself pacing back and forth in this small little jail cell in solitary confinement, wondering how the heck did I get here? When you start putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, you see a real interesting story that emerges, an unbelievable story, really.
911 emergency, require please fire ambulance.
Hi, yes, my son's not breathing. My son's not breathing.
You're in a dark room, you back into the light switch, and you can never unsee what you're seeing.
We were told they destroyed the World Trade Center, but in the years after that, Islamic terrorism was killing fewer Americans every year than lightning. And it's hard to kind of mobilize an entire defense structure against, something that really does not affect most Americans, threaten them in their homes. Vaccines now are the spear tip of the biosecurity agendas.
When you take these vaccines, we feel there's been over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else.
He calls what he does philanthrocapitalism. You use philanthropy to make yourself richer, to give yourself control over humanity.
First, we've got population. We could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
There is no doubt that we are experiencing a depopulation, and that is a plan.
We've got to stabilize the population.
What's wrong with the population? I mean,
we're too many people.
If you cannot achieve a balanced budget with the retirement system, you've got to lower life expectancy, and that's what's happening.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. It looks like this.
If your enemy is a germ, you have something that can get into everybody's homes and kill you. And if you're told constantly, be frightened of this, be fearful, this stuff is coming to get you, it's easy to manipulate that kind of fear and to disable people's capacity for critical thinking.
I think there are two parts to it. One is the shift of money up to the 1% and really control people's lives. When people come to realize that COVID-19 is just a cover under which these things have been brought in, it causes a type of friction in their brains. They just can't accept that.
We are using the federal credit, the Treasury, and the central bank to centralize control. Digital technology gives them the ability to control centrally in such an invasive way that what I described, their goal is slavery.
When Elias Brotberger goes to work, he doesn't need ID. Embedded in his hand is a microchip.
And that's the beginning of surveillance. So it'll be like China. Or it'll be digital money. If you don't do what you're told, you can't put food on the table. And if you're good, you get rewarded. That's what the reset's all about.
Through this whole tumult of COVID rising up and bringing together so many activists who are aware of, say, whether it be environmental issues, whether it be GMO foods, whether it be medicine, whether it be the corruption in government. We see it was through the medical industry, but now we see that there is a bigger picture looming.
We live on a planet where we're not allowed to know how the governance system at the top works. One of the most important things we need to protect our freedoms is to understand how the control grid is being built and stop it. And the best way to stop it is each one of us backs out of the control grid. They don't view us as the same species as them. They don't think of themselves as part of our civilization anymore.
I was muted. All right. We see the banner. The proper address is now input there, bigpicturemovie.com. Now, you may not see how our story tied in initially. And in fact, it's not till about part 3 or part 4 of the series where it actually begins to merge, where you see the agenda behind our whole court proceedings and what the government was trying to do in relation to exploiting the death of my son, to ultimately remove parental rights as well as medical choice here in Canada, wherein parents could be held criminally liable if they did not vaccinate their children and something happened to them that they deemed to be vaccine preventable. Now, also what we see there is the big picture as to what's going on in the world in relation to the domination and the depopulation. Now, those are two key words that, if you've been following my page for back in 2020, 2021, 2022, I was quite vocal about what was going on, and those are 2 words that I use quite often: that depopulation and domination was really what they were after here. And so if you follow my page, you'll see that I was also speaking about 2 main things: community and self-sufficiency. Community and self-sufficiency. And that I began speaking about community back in January of 2020, before this whole debacle really began with COVID, if you will. And so I strongly recommend, in the meantime, that you go to bigpicturemovie.com, and you have to purchase it. It's $25, but let me tell you this: it's well worth it. The common feedback I'm getting is that people are binge watching it, the whole 6 episodes in one sitting. So just be aware, if you're going to start it today, just go into it knowing that you have to have a cutoff point. Otherwise, you're going to be up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning watching it. I'm not even kidding you. It's a common thing. It is that emotionally compelling, and the information found in there is extremely powerful. I wish that we would have a tool like this in 2020 or 2021. It would have helped preserve a lot of people from falling prey to the system, to this whole agenda that they've been pushing. And so I recommend strongly, go and watch it. You're going to walk away empowered. Share it. Engage in watch parties. The producers of it are recommending that you do that you have watch parties, that you get that information out there. And so I strongly recommend that you go and you view that. And going back to it, the irony of this is at the same time that Health Canada is resurrecting this false narrative around my son, the death of my son, so that they can push this agenda, we have this docuseries emerge at like the exact same time, so as to counter that false narrative. So I'd strongly recommend that you go and watch it, because it's actually the most comprehensive story as a whole that we've ever shared in relation to what led up to all of this in one single place, because there's so much to the story surrounding Ezekiel that it's actually mind-boggling how many details, how many parties are involved in this, how corrupt the whole system is, how you have all these different segments of government interfacing to create this narrative, how they colluded together, including the police. The police were in on this as well, and we called them out on it. And suddenly the detachment that was involved with the investigation got purged. Sergeant goes on retirement and everybody else disperses. And so you're actually going to see that in the big picture, wherein it states the producer actually approached phoned to try to interview somebody there. Not a single person is that detachment that was there during the investigation process. They all just scurried like cockroaches as soon as the light was shown on them. And so this is the most comprehensive part of the story. And you're also going to hear about an individual who was paramount in exposing some of the corruption and how he's disappeared. Nobody has heard from him in just about 2 years, but he was absolutely paramount in bringing forth some key information, and it actually made it onto a news clip down in the US, and in exposing the medical examiner. And it's about a week or 2 after that, nobody that was in contact with him heard from him again. Nobody heard from him again after that news clip actually aired and exposed this potential fake medical or forensic pathologist who falsified my son's autopsy report. So I recommend watching The Big Picture. It is a phenomenally done docuseries. And then we're going to discuss it a little bit. It also includes Shawn Buckley as well, who we were waiting to have on here tonight. And we will have him back December 1st, 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Until then, I've covered enough details. We're now at 25 minutes. I'm going to let you go. I look forward to seeing you December 1st at 2 p.m. And if not, catch it on my page, on my Facebook page. I am being shadow banned. I don't get near the outreach that I once did, but just look up my page and you'll find the live stream on there. And until then, may God bless you all.